little airplane. This is the first time I've seen it, though. Is it new to America?
No, this has been here for 3-4 years that I owned it, and prior to that, my friend owned it. I'd say it's the design was first seen in about 2003, I think, at the Friedrichshafen show.
Where's the airplane manufactured then?
It's had a couple manufacturers. A couple brothers built the prototype, and then they licensed it out to DG to manufacture, and they didn't sell enough of the kit, so DG dropped out of it, and they're back into it again.
Okay.
And Pacific Aerosport on the other side of the field is the DG dealer, and they're the importer for the kit.
Now, the airplane looks to be aerobatic, is it?
Yes, when the U.S. started talking about light sport, they were building this same airplane as a European ultralight with the lighter weights. And when they heard the 1320, they said, we could stiffen that up a bit and make an aerobatic airplane. And this is the result.
Now, what type of construction is used in the airplane?
It's all composite, and it's high-tech composite. There's a lot of carbon fiber in it. And in general, if you take any of the pieces off and pick them up, it weighs about half of what you expect it to. So it weighs about 600 pounds empty. This has the Jabiru 85 horsepower engine in it. I was just talking with the importer on the UL engine, which is what they're putting in the newer ones now, and you'll find all the video on YouTube. The same airplane with the UL engine doing all kinds of stuff in the air shows.
And what kind of control systems is used in the airplane? It's a tail dragger, so is it standard stick and rudder style of control?
Yes, it is. It has a single brake, though. It doesn't have the dual brakes. And the tail wheel is unique. When we get around to the back of the airplane, I'll have to show you that.
Airfoil over the top of it.
Yes, and it doesn't have the typical spring and swivel that we're used to. It's just a vertical shaft, and it freewheels all the way around with one link that drives it. And it works well.
Now, how long have you, or how many hours have you been flying on the airplane now?
I've had it for about 3 years now, and I'm a flight instructor and end up flying everybody else's airplane except my own. So I haven't put a whole lot of hours on it. But it's a great airplane to fly, and I fly it whenever I get a chance.
It looks like it's got good visibility out of it as well.
Well, it's typical low wing restriction, but the bubble canopy you can see. So yeah, you can see out very well. But if you're a Cessna driver used to looking like that at the river you're following, the wing's in the way.
Now, what kind of numbers do you have on it for cruise, for climb rate, for stall, that type of thing?
It climbs nice, of course, with the 85 horsepower in the single seat. It cruises, it has its ultralight backing, so it's not as fast as most people think it is. I tend to look at the indicated airspeed more than the true airspeed because it depends on what the altitude and temperature is and everything, where the indicated is more consistent. And it flies real nice, indicating 100 to 110. I like to cruise slow, and so I usually keep it right around 100. RPMs, the Jabiru engine, they like to keep the oil temperatures down. And the airplane was built without an oil cooler, and then they added one, but it didn't have any flow through it. And so that's another reason for the slow cruise. If I push it too hard, the oil temperature goes higher than I like to see it. And we just put a oil cooler system on it, and I've got another cooling element to go into it, but we haven't installed it yet.
And what's the stall speed come in at?
It stalls about 45. It's got a nice flap system that's got 30 degrees of flap, and the flaps are good size and effective. But it's a symmetrical airfoil. They have one set of molds that they pull 4 halves off of, and they get a top and a bottom for the left wing and a top and a bottom for the right wing and glue them together. So that impacts its stall speed to some degree.
Now, is it come as a kit or ready to fly or both? Or?
It's a kit. And it's the typical kit type construction. You have the spar molded into the bottom half of the wing, and you install the hinges and linkages, and it meets the 51% rule. And you basically put some tape on the leading edge and fasten the trailing edge together and put the controls in it, and go around the fuselage and put all the stuff inside. This was the first one came into the country, and Chris Klicks, the dealer, and Mike Friend, who saw it at the German Air Show, and two of the factory reps came over and they put it together to go to Oshkosh, and they finished it in about 3 or 4 weeks.
So it's not like a high-time building where you're looking at a year or 1,000 hours, something like that?
I'm sure you can drag it out to that, but if you work at it, it goes together pretty quick.
And what kind of options are available for the airplane?
A lot of them. When you look at the kit price, it's not all that expensive, but there's a list of options about 1 foot long, and most of them in 3 digits. You can put a controllable pitch propeller on it. One of the big options is a trailer. It's built by a glider company, and the wings come apart, and the tail comes off of it, and it goes in a trailer. And the trailer is a $10,000 option, but it doubles as a hangar. And so that's something I feel is almost a requirement unless you live on an airport and have your own airplane. It does take a little bit to put it together, as opposed to a glider. You've got to plug in the fuel lines and things are a little bit heavier, but you can do one-man rigging with it. And the only problem I have with that is the mornings and evenings are the best time to fly, and I don't want to be standing there kicking mosquitoes when I can be out flying. So.
And I notice you've got a BRS parachute on it as well.
Yes, and it is aerobatic, and so that negates the requirement of having to carry a parachute and have it repacked every 90 days or 120 days. And so that's pretty much standard equipment.
Now it looks like you've got a very unique landing gear on this airplane.
It's a standard conventional gear. It's a spring Cessna type leg, that's fiberglass. And this has retractable landing gear, and it's a tailwheel airplane. Like I said, this came from the European ultralight designs, and it was before light sport was finalized. They didn't realize they were going to restrict the retractable landing gear on the light sport, and so they do make a fixed gear model now, and you can also get it with a nose reel. Myself, I like the retractable conventional gear, and you can build it as a motor glider and still have the repositionable landing gear.
Now we mentioned that it's got the Jabiru engine on it. Are there other engine options available for it?
Yes, they settled on the Jabiru, and that works very nicely. They did look at some other engines that they turned down, but since this was built, the UL 260 engine became available, and the airplanes next to us have the UL engines in them. Those are the bigger engines, and if you go on YouTube and Google Twister, you'll find some very nice air show routines that are done with the UL 260 engine, and they can go full inverted system where this doesn't have an inverted oil system.
Now how many of these are flying in the world then?
This is the only one that's flying in the US, I believe. There are about 3 or 4 kits out there. I don't know that any of those are finished. They may be. But I think there's several of them in Europe. It is one of the more expensive kits, and so there aren't as many of them as you'll find in some of the more popular airplanes.
So if somebody wanted to get some more information on the airplane, what's the easiest way to do that?
Contact Pacific Aerosport here on the Arlington Airport. They're on the south side of the field. And if you'll go to the Pacific Aerosport website, you'll find links to get all the specifications on it, prices, and everything you need to know.
Thank you very much for your time.
You're very welcome. And it is a beautiful airplane, and it flies as good as it looks.